Okay, so fantastic. Absolute pleasure to be here. I am feeling the Slovenian love, as always. It's my fourth time, I think, in Ljubljana. My first time by plane. Every other time I've come by train. I got here an hour and a half this morning because there was a 100-mile-an-hour tailwind from London. But I'm also very conscious that I'm keeping you from your drinks. Okay, so I'm not going to challenge the love that you're giving, and we'll try and go through this quite quickly because it's been a very inspiring and humbling day. There's been some amazing stuff going on as we plan the future of business. And it's good to be focused on the positives because basically when you look around the world at the moment, it can feel a little bit negative out there. We have two thin-skinned narcissists with father issues threatening to take us into nuclear Armageddon. We have also had one of the worst hurricane seasons in the Gulf of Mexico last year, 5 Category 5 storms on the back of each other. The cost to the US economy alone at $306 billion. And it's snowing in Morocco at the moment. You know that something is not right. Plus, as well as massive, catastrophic acts of avoidable self-harm that we now have to make the best of, like climate change, I hold my hand up here as a Brit and going, sorry about all the Brexit nightmare. And you know we're in strange territory when even the Queen stands up in Parliament, at the state opening of Parliament, wearing a hat which looks strangely like the EU flag. So you know we're in interesting times. And I say this is a bit like humanity having to look up its own fundament. You know, we're being confronted by challenges which are unprecedented in history. And this is the kind of the goal and the opportunity that we now have to rise to. I started my company Futerra 17 years ago. I always joke that when I first started working in sustainability, it was a bit like wetting yourself whilst wearing a dark suit. No one noticed, but it gave you a warm feeling inside. Now we say it's like teenage sex. Everyone says they're doing it. Very few people actually are, and those that are doing it quite badly. And these are old jokes, but I'm an environmentalist, so I recycle them. And our mission at Futerra has always been to make sustainability so desirable it becomes normal. And that's with the belief that people will run towards positive, engaging, aspirational visions of an achievable future with more energy and stamina than they run away from threats of doom and gloom and Armageddon. And sustainability is changing. You know, we're actually moving from where you spend money, from managing past impact, from doing less bad, or it being a vaguely philanthropic thing to do, to where you create future opportunity, how you do more good, and it being about $1 billion opportunity. And our work focuses on both, the logic and the magic. How do you get the strategies and the transformative business models and plans to take yourself to that better future? And how do you use the creativity, the magic of communication to make that stick? And if you want to wrap it up in one idea, it's about imagining better. And if you can't look out at the world now and imagine better, then you should probably just pack up and go home. So we've talked a lot today about what prosperity might mean as well. And prosperity in the broadest sense, about being successful, being able to flourish, being able to thrive. I was loving the story of the crystal making company, 350 years old. How old do you think the world's oldest company is? Quick guess. 1,400 years old. It's this wonderful company, Congo Gumi. It's a Japanese company, still run by the 42nd generation of the same family that started it. What do they make? Buddhist temples. I mean, okay? Okay, it's not a market that's going out of fashion very quickly, but this is the type of longevity we need to be thinking about. And we're not very good at this. Humanity is not very good at planning for the future. This is one of the world's first tin cans. Brilliant idea for preserving and storing and transporting perishable food. How long between the invention of the tin can and the invention of the can opener? 38 years. 38 years of people opening cans with hammers and chisels and knives and cutting themselves and lacerating themselves. And we're not very good at that. But I'm an optimist. And the reason I'm an optimist is because I'm privileged enough to see the solutions. We've seen some amazing businesses present today, big businesses in transformation and small businesses focusing on meeting real human need. And I think, I always quote William Gibson, who said, the future's out there, it's just not evenly distributed yet. And the big problem we have is actually this wonderful German word, the Geschichtsspalt, the story gap. because the story we tell ourselves about the way the world works no longer works. And this is why we have the rise of populism, and this is why we have the problems with nationalism, because our story is not serving us anymore. We need a new story, a new narrative. A couple of people have alluded to the power of the market. The market is a terrifying force in some respects, you know? It makes a good servant, a bad master, but a terrifying God if we worship it. The market is here to serve us, not the other way around. And that's where it gets interesting. So, you know, we need to tell better stories. Dogs sniff bottoms. We tell stories. They're the way we make sense of our relationships with each other and the wider world around us. And they're the most powerful organizing framework we have. And the story we're living at the moment is the story of the Great Acceleration. This is a work from the Stockholm Resilience Center. I don't use too many graphs, but I cheat by putting 24 graphs on one graph. But if you look at all of these charts, what you see is they all go exponential around about 1950. So basically, we've been going in a terrifying direction in 2 or 3 short generations. And this is well documented. We've talked about Planetary Boundaries, again from the Stockholm Resilience Center, and the work of renegade economist Kate Raworth, who's saying about the safe donut for humanity, living within environmental limits, and building on a strong social foundation. And of course, we've also mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. This is our plan. This is a plan for a better future, which requires everyone to work together. Government, civil society, business, big and small. This is how we get out of this mess. And it's an enormous opportunity. Achim Steiner, the head of the UN Development Programme, has said the SDGs alone represent a $2.5 trillion investment opportunity each year if we are going to meet them. Now, if that's not a big market opportunity, I don't know what is. But why are these facts not landing? I've worked in this stuff for 20 years, and the reason they're not landing is because it's not about the facts. There's a huge tension now between the facts and what people feel. And this is behind Trump, it's behind Brexit, it's behind all sorts of things. People don't embrace or don't reject a broken story until there's a better one to replace it. And what we're trying to craft here is that better story. And if you want to put this in more stark terms, this is some evidence from the US, where they measured ordinary scientific intelligence against the probability of the acceptance of anthropogenic climate change. And what you see, as scientific intelligence goes up, the acceptance of the data and the evidence goes up. Until you split out political allegiance, and then with Republicans, the more scientifically literate they are, the more they reject the evidence. Now, that's not about the facts. That's because it doesn't fit with their story of the way the world works. And I always use this particular graph because this is the most damning one of all. This is the work of Carbon Tracker, which shows, actually, if you look at all the fossil fuel reserves listed on global stock exchanges, and then you look on the left there about what we can actually burn if we want to keep climate change within 2 degrees, there are 5 times more fossil fuel reserves listed on global stock exchanges as valuable assets than we can actually burn if we want to keep climate change in 2 degrees. I'll say that one more time for dramatic effect. There's 5 times more fossil fuel reserves listed on global stock exchanges than we can actually burn if we want to stay within 2 degrees. The entire system is in denial at the moment. You know, this is our challenge. And actually, we talk about the subprime property bubble that took down the global economy in 2007 and 2008. The subprime carbon bubble is even bigger. There is potentially $22 trillion of unburnable asset that your pensions are probably invested in. So even that radical left-wing environmentalist, the governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, has said most fossil fuel reserves can't be burned. And they can't, and they won't be. And that's why we need a new narrative, and that's why idiots like this frustrate us, because he may want to dig more coal, but actually solar already employs more people in US electricity generation than oil, coal, and gas combined. The world is changing, and people need to embrace the fact that it is. But it's going to get bumpy. It's going to get messy. The Pentagon refers to this as a VUCA world. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And, you know, when the Pentagon talks about this stuff, that this shit just got real. They're doing the scenarios. They're looking at the climate change problems that are coming down the line. And when I first started working at Futerra, our clients used to come to us and say, what should our sustainability strategy be in the context of our business? And this is the challenge for big companies. You know, they're trying to devise a sustainability strategy in the context of what they already do. Where the radical edge is now is people say, what should our business strategy be in the context of sustainability? What does the world need, and how do we deliver it in a way which is sustainable in the longer term? And there's lots of casualties out there who have failed to recognize two things. One is you have to live your purpose, and your purpose has to be meaningful. Secondly, you don't get to decide whether you disrupt your own business model or not. You either do it to yourself or someone does it to you. And Kodak is the famous example. If Kodak had lived its purpose, it would have, which was capturing the Kodak moment, you know, on capturing on film the children's birthday, your great holiday, then they would have invented Instagram, you know, and they would have disrupted themselves. They put the digital camera on the shelf in the 70s and said, we can't get involved in that because that's a threat to our business model. Not your decision. Someone else will disrupt you. And we see this time and time again. It's why the music industry didn't invent Spotify. It's why the banks can't get involved in PayPal. All of these big businesses don't see the disruption coming. And it's going to get like a big shakedown. So you look here, the average company lifespan in the US Standard & Poor's 500 index, back in the 1960s, 60 years. Now we're looking about 10 to 15 years. You know, the process of annihilation or Schumpeterian waves of creative destruction is going to get more intense. Because it's right that it does so. As the cartoon is saying, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. You know, that is not going to be enough. And it's always important to put a quote from an extreme right-wing thinker in your presentations, I find. So this is Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged. She said, we can evade reality, but we can't evade the consequences of evading reality. And so much of our business world is still willfully blind to the scale and the urgency of the challenges we face. And so in terms of the narrative, part of the problem we have is where we are at is what we see. And the mainstream, we are in the enlightened group in this room because we can see both the challenge and the opportunity. Most people just see the challenge, and instead of embracing the change required, they go back to a past which perhaps didn't exist, and they try and romanticize it. And we've seen this evolve, okay, in the movements. A short history of responsible business starts off with environmental efficiency, builds on social responsibility. We've talked about social business models, but I think it's really about changing the rules. I mean, efficiency is great, but efficiency is just about doing the same thing with less carbon, less water, less materials, less packaging. It's not really changing what you do. Then we have, we've got to not just do things better, but we actually have to do better things. The second phase was corporate social responsibility. If I see another picture of a pair of hands holding a small, vulnerable green plant as a representation of corporate responsibility, I will shoot myself in the head. Most of this is about what I call philanthropy. It's not real philanthropy. It's token. It's on the edge. It's used as an excuse for carrying on your existing business model. Whilst there are some good examples of people trying to create shared value, where the economic value is delivered by delivering social value, not all of them are particularly brilliant, and some of them are still quite self-serving in that respect. Well, what I'm really trying to get at here is our challenge is the march of progress, and to reinvent this idea of progress, because we like to think that progress is linear, that actually it gets better with every passing generation, and every generation enjoys a better quality of life than the one that came before them. We kind of have that embedded as a narrative right now. Unfortunately, what we're doing at the moment is creating progress traps. So our pursuit of cheap, available, abundant energy in the form of fossil fuels creates the carbon emissions which cause climate change, which creates a perfect progress trap. Because actually, if we carry on doing the same thing, we compound the problem. We make it worse. We have to do something different. And the world, as I said, is VUCA, and it's going to be hard to navigate. This is what we might call the age of uncertainty. So people are worried about growing inequality, the so-called alternative facts and fake news. We have climate change, we have the rapid digitalization, we have political polarization, and of course, the challenge of migration. You combine that with this idea of the consumer economy, and I hate the word consumer, it's basically paraphrasing Fight Club, you know. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like who largely don't care. You know, and that is supposedly the engine of our economy. But what we've seen so powerfully today actually is that the future belongs to those with purpose. And I don't know if anyone's seen Avenue Q, the musical. There's a song in the show which is called Purpose. And it says, it's that little flame that lights a fire under your ass. It's what gets you up in the morning. It's what allows you to spend your waking hours doing something worthwhile and valuable. The show also has Muppets having sex in it, if that's your kind of thing. But really, without a purpose that is bigger than yourself, you will serve only yourself. And I think this is the business challenge, is how do you get something bigger than yourself? Because, and we've lost the quote here, because the color of the slide has changed. But anyone know who these guys are? These guys are the Rochdale pioneers in 1844 who established the principles of the cooperative movement in northern England. Amazing guys, and the quote at the bottom here, I can probably remember it from memory, it said, "The idea of cooperation is as old as modern human society itself. It's the idea that conflict and competition are the primary drivers of economic progress that is new." And that's true. You know, the idea that competition and conflict are the things that drive economic progress is a very, very modern invention. And it's cooperation which has enabled most of human history to happen. And we need to just reflect on the fact that cooperatives are enormous. This is a gap in our story at the moment. Top 300 cooperatives in the world have a turnover of $1.6 trillion, employ over 100 million people, and are in every sector, from agriculture to banking to insurance to retail to health and utilities. But I'm not saying you have to go down the cooperative route. Actually, you can still be a profit-making business with purpose and do extremely well. A meta-analysis by Harvard Business Review showed that purposeful business drives financial performance for stakeholders and your brand. 90% concluded that companies with good standards are better investment opportunities. 88% showed that those good practices result in better operational performance. And 80% show that stock market performance is positively correlated with good sustainability practices. We have all the evidence we need to justify what we want to do. There's also this burgeoning movement of benefit corporations, and Futerra, my company, is one. And benefit corporations allow you to rewrite your articles of association. So your reason for existence is to deliver social and environmental value, not shareholder value. You can make profit, but it liberates you from that constraint of being a slave to the finances when you can actually focus on the social environmental rather. And this is going mainstream too. This gentleman here, Larry Fink, the CEO of the world's biggest investment firm, BlackRock, which has assets of $6 trillion globally, has said, without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve its full potential. And he's written to all the CEOs of the businesses he invests in and says, if you haven't got a sense of purpose, you better find one quick. And so you're actually starting to see these very mainstream people saying the same things. And for me, I think this is fundamental. Profit is your reward for serving society. That's why you deserve your profit, by giving society something it actually needs and delivering it in a way which is sustainable. And I'm just going to finish with some of my favorite businesses which I think are doing radical things in this type of sector. So first one is New Light Technologies. They've just signed a £10 billion partnership with IKEA. What New Light does is absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide and turn it into plastic. So you're taking what was previously a fossil fuel feedstock to make plastic, and instead you're drawing the CO2 out of the atmosphere and turning it into a useful material, helping to tackle climate change at the same time. This is going to be huge because this is carbon positive materials. Another one, BioBean, one of my favorites in London. These guys take the 100,000 tons of waste coffee generated by London's massive caffeine habit, and they extract a biofuel from those grounds, which you can then use in vehicles, and then they compress the remaining grounds into pellets, which you burn in a biomass boiler. So you take a waste product and you generate 2 new revenue streams from it. Plus, when you put the fuel in a bus, it makes the bus smell like coffee. So you can say, wake up and smell the buses, or I love the smell of buses in the morning, which you don't say now. A Swedish client of ours just developed this product, which is called Oomph. And this is a textured soy protein, which is almost exactly the same as chicken breast. I gave it to my 13-year-old stepson, and he went, no way, this is chicken. And I said, no, it's soy. And I think we're going to see huge disruption in the food chain around these type of issues. Second to last is Flute, which is a cardboard furniture company. But it's not just a cardboard furniture company. These desks can be put up in 2 minutes by one person. Try doing that with an IKEA desk. You can park a car on the top of them. They're so strong. Plus, they do a circular economy service for their clients. So they will take your waste cardboard and paper materials and then make it into office furniture for you. And once the desk is worn out, you just send it back. You can have them printed in any color or pattern you want. This is the future of furniture. And last but by no means least are these two lunatics, Steve and Rich, who are West Country boys from the west of England who used to drink cider in the pub and talk about global food problems. And then they took an abandoned air raid shelter, an old tube tunnel in South London, and turned it into this, which is now a renewable energy-powered, LED-lit, hydroponic farm 30 metres under the streets of London. Farm to fork in 4 hours. So almost 0 food miles, the freshest, most nutritious food you can get, and it's like something out of Star Trek. And I think this, to conclude, and my sort of challenge to you, this is the crossroads we find ourselves at. My business partner, Solitaire, in her new book, The Happy Hero, talks about humanity's challenge as being very similar to the type of therapy journey that people with psychological problems have to go through. Because let's face it, as a civilization, we have some psychological problems. And she's saying, you know, you could start off normal, and then change starts to speed up, the awareness of the crisis grows, you keep trying the old solutions, you enter a stage of high anxiety, and then you get to the crossroads of decision making. And then you have 3 options. You can be bad, whereby you deny the reality, we blame ourselves, we say, well, we're not worth it, we're terrible people, we deserve everything we get. You try to survive, but you end up in disaster. Or you can be blind, which I think is roughly where we are at the moment, which is we delay the action, we protect the vested interests and the status quo, we try sticking plasters over particular parts of the problem, but we still get the disaster, we just get the disaster a bit later. What we actually need to do is to be bright, is to think positively, explore creatively new things, new business models, new products, new services, and that's where we get the big payoff. That's where we get the sustainability transformation. And I think, in conclusion, you know, every civilization will, at some point, bump up against the limits of its planet. Any intelligent civilization which is curious and exploratory and adventurous will bump up against those limits. The proving ground is what happens when you hit those limits and what you do next. And I would argue that this extraordinary emergency calls for an extraordinary emergence. You know, you are part of a global movement now where people are following their gut instinct that not everything is right with the world. They're using their mental intelligence and creativity to try and come up with the new novel solutions which will solve those problems, but also they're leading with their hearts because they know that that's what makes a difference both to their own work and the work around them. And if we can combine those 3 things, head, heart, and gut, then we have a transformative movement on our hands, which these conversations that you're having in this room are going on everywhere, where innovative small businesses are partnering and working alongside the big incumbent businesses to create something extraordinary. It's time, perhaps, for David to dance with Goliath, and then we might change the world. Thank you very much.